Well, the only place to start really is to recap what an Evora GT430 is. In my opinion, it is the pinnacle of petrol-powered Lotus road cars to date. It is the highest spec road car that Lotus ever produced. It is the closest thing you'll get to a British GT3. And for those that found the Emira a bit soft and not quite focused enough, it's everything the Emira was lacking. Of course, to be fair, the GT430 was much more expensive when it was new, starting from £112,000 in the UK. It's really the ultimate version of the Evora 400 generation of cars, which means supercharged and charge-cooled Edelbrock supercharger, the GT430 was launched in 2017 and most customer cars came through in 2018. At the time, Lotus was going through a period of making all the cars lighter, faster and louder. So the GT430 was lavished with carbon fibre panels. You can see the unpainted ones very clearly, but there are a lot of other panels such as the front and rear bumpers, which are also in carbon fibre. All the carbon was supplied by ProDrive, who also supply Aston Martin and McLaren among others, and it is of extremely high quality. So the GT430 overall weighed about 100 kilograms less than the Evora 400, and that is including the wider wheels and tyres and the extra aero parts that were added to the car. Those aero parts were not just for show. Lotus claimed 256 kilos of downforce at the car's top speed, which is approximately twice what the 991 GT3 produced, and 85 kilos more than the Exige Cup 430. There was also a version available without all the aero parts called the GT430 Sport. It was actually slightly faster in terms of top speed and in a straight line than the GT430 and 10 kilograms lighter. However, I think they only sold one car in the UK and less than 10 worldwide. So for the purposes of this buyer's guide, I'm going to focus on the full-fat GT430, of which there were 60 made for the world. According to Lotus, there are currently 25 GT430s in the UK. That makes it incredibly rare in anyone's book. To put that into some sort of perspective, Porsche made 10 times the number of 997 GT3 RS 4 litres. They made appropriately 918 918 Spiders. There were 499 of the Speciale Apertas, which is one GT430 for every 8 of those. And of the ultimate series of Ferrari supercar, the rarest remains the 288 GTO with 272 cars built. So other things unique to the GT430 at the time were the J-hook disc brakes, titanium exhaust which goes blue, adjustable Öhlins TTX dampers with stronger, lighter Evora GT4 race car mounts, a baffled sump to cope with the higher cornering forces, a 5-way traction control system, some additional carbon fibre trim parts and gloss black bits on the inside, and unique instrument graphics. One thing the GT430 lacked was the exhaust button that the Evora 400 came with. Due to type approval, you could no longer make the car louder below 4,500 RPM, which is all the button did, but quite a few owners have reinstated theirs. So there weren't many variations during the car's production run, but one way to distinguish earlier cars is this quarter panel here is made of carbon fibre, even though it looks like dark glass. It's a solid pane of carbon fibre, and at the back the diffuser was originally plastic and flush fitting like this, and the later cars were made of aluminium and protrude out slightly. They are the same as fitted to the GT410s. It's purely down to personal taste really. I was told it neither increases downforce nor reduces weight. The GT430 was very well equipped as standard. There weren't a great deal of extras available, even though some things like air conditioning and sound deadening were options. I don't know of any GT430s without them. You could spec your GT430 with 2+2 rear seats or 2+0. You could also get an automatic torque converter gearbox, but the vast majority of cars are 2+0 seating with 6-speed manual gearbox. But personalisation was absolutely part of the buying process of a GT430, so many cars have unique combinations of interior colours and stitching, exterior cat scratches, brake calipers and so on. So very few GT430s are exactly alike. The seats and stitching on my car were completely bespoke and based on a Photoshop mock-up that I sent them. A few cars such as mine did without the optional stereo system, which is no problem at all. As long as you've got a good smartphone mount, you get better sat-nav through your phone and better sound quality through a set of headphones. The double-din Alpine unit did though come with a basic rear view camera, which is useful in a car with limited rear visibility. One other very minor detail that's very hard to see are the fake carbon mirror casings that most cars came with. And for me this is highly questionable on a car with so much real high quality carbon that I had my mirror casings in regular black. But most cars came with the carbon dip mirrors and most owners aren't remotely bothered about it. This is a pretty polarising issue for many with the GT430. The optional seats are the very nicely finished carbon backed Sparco seats that you can see here. I think they look fantastic and they are a redesign of the Sparcos that were introduced in the Evora 400. They are not actually more supportive in any way and not meaningfully lighter, but they do tilt forward, which makes access to the parcel shelf behind or rear seats if you have them a lot easier. Put very simply, if you are much under 6 foot or over 100 kilos, these are the seats to have. However, if you are 6 foot tall or over and under 100 kilos, you want the carbon race seats. For me, without question. You sit at least 2 inches lower. There's more headroom for a helmet when you're driving on track. They save a huge amount of weight and they much improve the driving position. However, to experience them at their best, you really need to get some adjustable seat brackets. Lotus had to mount them extremely upright to comply with airbag legislation and really should have fitted adjustable seat brackets, as this is the source of most of the complaints. These are the brackets I was talking about. These seat brackets are slightly different. You can see there's 3 adjustable settings. It's on the middle setting and it just helps recline the seat back a little bit, which makes a big difference to the driving position. And because this now is sloping upwards, you get more support on the heavy braking under your thighs. So these are the only real modification I've done, but they're great. I do recommend it. You can, if you can't get any of these, you can just drill more holes in the standard seat brackets, so it's not a problem. Now there's no getting away from it, the GT430 is definitely a higher maintenance proposition than an Evora 400. In my opinion, it is absolutely worth it. and it is only a byproduct of the fact that they used authentic and exotic motorsport components. So the two main additional service requirements are the baffled sump and the Öhlins dampers. Now, going strictly by the book, they should both be inspected every 2 years. When it comes to the sump baffles, this is pretty straightforward because your Lotus dealer can fit those while it's in for service, and they are included in the B service, which at Lotus Silverstone cost £640. Servicing the Öhlins TTX dampers is a bit more of a procedure. Unless you have a spare set of dampers, the car will have to be put up on blocks for a few weeks while the dampers are sent off to an approved Öhlins service centre. For me, the very best place to send them to is Mick Gardner Racing, as they helped develop these dampers with Lotus for this car. Having had this done recently, the cost was just under £800 plus VAT for the service, and there is also a labour charge for getting the dampers off and sent up to Mick Gardner Racing. So all in all, it is going to be around £1,000 to do. But please don't let that put you off, because this car is one of the great driving experiences, and the Öhlins dampers are a big part of why it is so special. I think it's also fair to say that most dealers take a fairly relaxed approach with the servicing guidelines. They are guidelines, and I think for a car that's not used intensively on track, the service intervals can be extended way beyond 2 years. I chose to get it done because I wanted the car to be at its very best to drive, and if I'm being honest, I can't notice any difference. I think the dampers were in great shape before they went up. I think it's also fair to say that quite a few GT430s have never had their dampers serviced. However, I think it's a really good sign if you are interested in buying a GT430. The first thing I would do is check, have the dampers been serviced in the car's lifetime? I wouldn't need to insist on them being done every 2 years, but if I had seen they had been done before I bought the car, I'd take that as a very good sign of a very well maintained car. If I was looking at a car and the dampers hadn't been serviced in its lifetime, it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me, but I would consider the cost of getting them done as part of the negotiations. But if I was looking through the history on a car and the dampers had been changed every 2 years regardless of mileage, I would shake the man's hand and pay him his asking price. Being very high quality dampers, there is a considerable difference between the softer and harder settings. There are 21 clicks available, and unlike some cheaper dampers, each click actually makes a difference. They are two-way adjustable, which means you can adjust both compression and rebound, and they can easily be upgraded to 3-way or even 4-way at the service if you wanted. Adjustment at the front wheels is pretty easy if you turn the steering on full lock, but to adjust the rear dampers it's much easier to take the rear wheels off, which does require a bit more commitment, but again worth it for me for the duality of being so capable on both road and track. These brakes are fantastic. They have great feel, amazing stopping power. The downside is that they in fact produce a lot of brake dust. Now that J-hook design actually is designed to fling brake dust out from the surface of the disc. So they do collect a lot of brake dust. This is the downside of having all that race tech. Racing cars don't care about things like brake dust. But I've just washed this wheel and you can see what's happening. The surface dust, brake dust, is corroding on the disc, and when I take it out for a drive now, which is essential after a wash to get rid of all the standing water and also to clean up the brakes, you'll see that that will fling more dust, brake dust, onto the wheels. The only way to get these wheels really clean is to take them off and poke around. That's the way to get them really clean. But just in terms of cleaning the outside, you can see the problem. Not so bad on the rear, but overall worth it. It's the same problem with any road car with extreme steel disc brakes. So anything to add about the brakes is that if you do use the car on track, you should consider the brake discs to be consumable items. Pad wear is also increased by the J-hook design, but you won't find that an issue if you're only using the car on the road. But be sure to have a good look at the condition of the discs, particularly the front discs. If the rear discs are worn, this is a sign that the owner has been on track and kept it in sport mode, which uses more rear brakes than race mode. The brakes should feel strong and smooth. If you're feeling juddering under the pedal, you're probably going to have to use the brakes quite hard to feel it, but if you feel that, that's a sign that maybe the discs are past their best. They are of course not cheap to replace, but the idea of the two-piece disc like you see here, so the bells and the discs are detachable, two pieces. The idea was supposed to be that you could replace just the outer disc. So that's great in theory. In practice, unfortunately, Lotus won't sell you just the disc, so you have to buy the whole lot. You're looking at about £4,000 to £5,000 for 4 new J-hook discs. However, the two-piece brake discs are lighter than one piece, so there's some unsprung weight saving. And to be fair, the regular cross-drilled brakes are only a few £100s cheaper, and they are nowhere near as good, especially if you want to go on track. The rear Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s have lasted better than I was expecting. I'm still actually on the original set, although I would like to replace them, but that's more because of age than wear at this stage, after 6,000 miles and 5 or so track days. Tyre wear has essentially been the reverse of the experience I had with my Exige, which used to wear out rears but never wore out fronts. The Evora's the other way around. The rears have lasted better than expected, whereas the fronts have worn more quickly than expected, and I'm on a second set of fronts already. In terms of cost, in comparison to the Exige Cup 430, a full set of Michelin Cup 2s, they both wear Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s, a full set for the Evora GT430, which are wider than any other Evora, would set you back about 1,300 quid. A set for an Exige 430 is around £1,000, so it's a little bit more. The rears are pretty much the same on both cars, it's just that the Evora's fronts are quite a lot bigger, they are more expensive. Now, when the car came out, the aero package was considered pretty radical at the time, and there weren't many other cars with as many vents and holes and scoops. So I had no idea as to the extent of stone damage, but there are a lot of body panels that look very vulnerable to stone damage, such as the cutaway A panels behind the front wheels. So obviously I applied PPF liberally to the car, and I'm happy to say that in general stone damage is far less than I was concerned it might be. I had these all covered in PPF because I thought stones were going to flick up and I'd have stone damage here, but I needn't have worried because the way these are designed, you don't get any stones, just air from the arches, so that's not of any concern. It's looking very nicely stone chip free after 6,000 miles, thanks to the PPF. I've just done a good job. So I had imagined again here that there'd be a lot of stone damage around this area, but there's none whatsoever. I had that PPF'd anyway, but you only really pick up gravel and bits like that at low speed. At higher speed, everything just disappears out the back. Now this panel here, I imagined that this panel would be absolutely destroyed by stones. This looks like stones, that's not. This panel here being so exposed to the wheel, I thought would be absolutely ruined, and it's carbon fibre. But the PPF on here has done a good enough job, a much better job than I thought it might actually. Now I do think it's a good idea to get some protection under this carbon splitter. It's a very expensive thing to replace, and I've used this slip low pads, which just protects. It means you can scuff this and protect that. I think that's worth having on one of these, but obviously if you were buying one, get down and have a look under here and you can get some idea on how carefully the car has been treated and how well it's been treated. I mean, on this car I've never had any problem with the seal. It's never had any water ingress issues, but I've heard that was a known problem with Evoras. Some of them had a damp footwell. So if you have a damp footwell, if you feel the carpet is damp, that's one with some sort of water seal issues. So I guess you could feel around in this area. If it was damp, that would be something to note. Now, one thing I would ask to see if I was buying a GT430 is I would get them to pull the data on the car. And you can get a printout of all the data on the car, and it's incredibly detailed. So we can see here number of standing starts, 0 on my car. That would be encouraging if I was looking to buy a car, because Evora clutches are notoriously expensive to replace. There's a big labour cost, and standing starts will hammer the clutch and put a lot of stress on the drivetrain. So you've got things like low oil pressure events, 0. You've also got, so there's time spent at various RPM. So my car spent 13 minutes between 6.5 and 7,000 RPM, and so on. So it's incredibly detailed. So just to give you some idea of what it costs typically to run a GT430, I can tell you that of the 5 services I've had, the cheapest one was £280 and the most expensive was £2,671, which was this year's service, 2023, and that included the baffles in the sump, and it also included the damper servicing. These numbers also include some additional costs which are entirely optional, such as the Castrol SRF hydraulic fluids, which is a great idea if you do take the car on track, but it's not at all necessary for road use or indeed light track use. So I hope those of you who have stayed to watch until the end found this guide interesting and useful. It's very detailed, it was very thoroughly researched. A number of GT430s have come on the market and sold in recent months, so I imagine there are a few people out there who are interested, and I hope this video becomes a useful resource for those looking for something a bit more grown up than the Exige and a bit more focused than the Emira. I only hope that if one or two of you do end up buying a GT430 after watching this, that you enjoy it as much as I do mine. I think the car is an absolute masterpiece and an incredible achievement for Lotus. It is an utterly intoxicating driving experience and a privilege to own one of the 60 made. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ask in the comments or message me directly. I will do my very best to answer for you. Thank you, as always, for watching.